We're now joined by the voice of TCU Athletics, Brian Estridge, on 365 Sports. TCU in Lawrence, game day and all. Unbeaten Kansas, unbeaten TCU. Brian, did you circle this game on that schedule when it came out a while back?
Only after at Big 12 Media Days you told me that would be the case. No, never in our wildest imagination did we think that this would be a matchup of two unbeaten. This is the first time since 1960, David, that two unbeatens have met in Lawrence in October. That tells you a little bit about how long it's been for the Kansas Jayhawks. Yeah, I mean, it's an intriguing matchup. I still think that we don't know a ton about either team. I mean, I think we learned a little bit more about TCU against Oklahoma. I'm still not sure about Kansas just based on the schedule that they played. But nonetheless, all you can do is play the teams that are on your schedule, right? And they took care of business.
I'm going to guess you said 1960.
Yeah.
Was John Hadel at Kansas back in 1960?
Probably had to be. And what's interesting is it happened in the month of October. Kansas was 2-0. They were playing Syracuse, who was 1-0. So I guess the season started a little later back then as well. So it's the last time we've seen that happen in Lawrence.
You mentioned Oklahoma, and we'll get to Kansas and TCU, but they boat raced them. They had better athletes, more speed, and players running free, and maybe it was Oklahoma confused or lined up differently. Were you sitting there sometimes in amazement watching what was going on?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that TCU could have success against Oklahoma just based on film study, listening to coaches and things of that nature. I thought they could do it, but you don't know until you know. And when you get in there and you see firsthand, like you said, guys running free, busted coverages on defense by Oklahoma, an offensive line for TCU that really controlled the line of scrimmage throughout the game. Then you start, and then candidly, the quarterback play of the Sooners. I mean, that's what shocked me, is that Oklahoma doesn't have a big time quarterback on the roster. And I know Dylan Gabriel had been okay early on. Got hurt in that ball, but he was, hey, it's not as if, he's a lefty. I'll use this analogy. It's not as if he was Jim Zorn, in that game. So I think that, I think once you got into the game, you saw, TCU's a better football team here. It feels like Brent Venables has taken 11 years or whatever it was at Clemson, where he could build his defense year after year after year after year, and he tried to cram it into 3 months in Norman, and you got players who aren't quite grasping it yet.
We saw Chandler Morris at his best moment when he just riddled and just frustrated the heck out of Baylor. He was dynamic, and then things slowed down. He got hurt earlier this year. He was the choice. Did him getting hurt, with all due respect to him, open this door?
Oh, yeah, no question. I shouldn't say – I'd like to think TCU could still be sitting at 4-0 with Chandler Morris at quarterback. But you're right. He gets hurt in the Colorado game after being named the starter. Had won the job, I'll be honest with you, Smokey. He had looked much better than Max, especially the last 3 weeks of camp. He had flat out won the job. And, and then Max gets the second opportunity, and he's just made the most of it. Now, they've also reworked the offense a little bit to benefit Max and his running ability. And I think kudos to Garrett Riley, the offensive coordinator, for doing that. We were joking about that in the office today, that, Max is on the Heisman Trophy watch list a little bit now for some folks. If he ends up in New York, because I think he was fourth on one list, if he ends up in New York, what does that say about Chandler Morris, who had beaten him out for the job? You look at it and you go, man, have you got two of the top 4 quarterbacks in the country sitting in Fort Worth?
How much do you think Max sitting down, watching, or losing the job may have somehow maybe made him better?
Yeah, I think it could have. I'll be honest with you. I think it's just coaching that's made him a lot better, too. I think that has made a huge difference for him. I think his technique is better. His fundamentals are better. He's getting rid of the football a lot quicker. He's not concerned about, getting his butt chewed out after every play. Hey, Sonny kind of operates with, okay, that one didn't work. Let's go to the next. Mm-hmm. And so I think that has calmed him down. I think he's got, good news is he's got a great offensive line in front of him. He's had some weapons at wide receiver, and they can run the football. That makes your quarterback better.
Speaking of running, and Max, of course, can do it himself as well. We saw that. Kendry Miller, what a great story from a Class 2A school, Mount Enterprise. Look at these numbers. 6, 7, 8, 9 yards a carry. Everyone seems to have a long touchdown. Everybody seems to almost have a touchdown. We knew that there were dynamic players for TCU. Are they even more dynamic than you thought?
Yeah, and I think the offense has a lot to do with that. I mean, I think the versatility of it, the fact that they do have so many weapons that it's not as if you can slough off a guy and double someone else because that guy's going to make you pay now. You're right, though. I mean, this is an offense that leads the country in big plays, averaging 8.9 yards a play. That's number one in America. And you're right. We look up, there's a 67-yard run, a 63-yard run, a 74-yard pass. And we're talking about just plays against Oklahoma. They had more yards on big plays, 4 or 5 big plays than Oklahoma had for the day. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been pretty fun to watch, I'll be honest with you. And I give a lot of credit to Sonny Dykes and Garrett Riley for the scheme that I think is really sort of, I think it's allowed guys to just go make plays. And you're seeing so many guys running free, too. That's what's interesting here early on. I don't think you'll see that against Kansas. I think they're much more fundamentally sound. But still, though, to see it here early on has been impressive.
You mentioned Kansas. They've won most of their games by outscoring people. And we know about the great start by Daniels. But they won an ugly game. And, we kind of debated on our show about, but if that's who they are, I just said, listen, they found a way to win the game. It was ugly. They can't rely on that week in and week out. But how much is it just KU now knows how to win?
Yeah, I think it's some of that. I really do. I think it's a culture change up there that Lance Leipold has put in place. I think the thing there is that he built a system around his players. He said, hey, we're Kansas. We got to do things a little bit differently. And, you look at what they're doing on offense. They've got a versatile quarterback who can run it and throw it. But they also kind of changed the way they're attacking the offensive line. This is an offensive line that's a little undersized, but the way they block is like playing an academy. It feels like we're going back to play Air Force here. And so I think he was wise in that, hey, maybe Kansas can't get the 6'7", 330 tackle, but we can get a 6'4", 305 that can move, and as strong as an ox. And so I think he's been real smart in that. And I think these guys have bought into that system. Here's the other thing, David, and you talk, they don't make mistakes. I mean, look at Daniels. I mean, his touchdown to interception ratio since he became the starter last year, so I don't have the numbers in front of me, it's like 18-2. I mean, that's pretty impressive. If you got a young guy like that who can take care of the football like that, I mean, these guys are getting coached up.
You didn't know about TCU because of who they played. Colorado's not very good. Tarleton State, SMU. Again, we know how intense that rivalry is now. But then Oklahoma, Kansas, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, back-to-back games that are ranked teams now that Kansas is ranked. I asked you about the importance of this game, that this would be the onslaught right here. Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, we knew they would be better.
But you didn't think that after Oklahoma, all of a sudden you may have a tougher test against Kansas.
Right.
Yeah, you never thought that. Here's what we found out so far, I think, in the Big 12. There are no gimmies.
None.
There's not a gimme on the schedule this year. I mean, people look at Iowa State or West Virginia and say, but you know what? Hey, Frogs have to go to West Virginia. I know how hard that could be. Iowa State's terrifically coached. They'll figure it out. So there are no gimmies in this league. I think you get to some of the other leagues. We talk about this all the time in the SEC. You can find a win or two in the SEC. It's hard to just fall into one in the Big 12. I mean, you got to work your tail off to get that. And so I think that's what this team is realizing. And the one thing that I really liked about the approach that Sonny brings is that every game is the same. And it's not SMU was bigger or Oklahoma's bigger or, hey, don't worry about Tarleton. No, he treats every game the same. And it's not just coach talk. It's their approach. It's their preparation. It's everything. So I think that might be a difference maker for this team.
What Gary Patterson did there for the longest of time was fantastic. One of the best jobs in America. What he did year in and year out with some ups and downs, but also some amazing games. Is it just because they needed a change change. I don't want to use the word toxic. You can, and I'm not saying you will, but everyone kind of just got tired of that whatever attitude or atmosphere was inside that building.
Yeah, I think that's it. I'll be honest with you. I mean, it has been remarkable, David, how folks are smiling and happy and enjoying themselves, and the atmosphere among the staff. And I'm not talking about the football staff as much as I'm talking about the support staff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think, and it's almost been a freeing, if you will. And I think these players, you hear them talk, and they kind of say that. And to me, I think that to me has been the biggest difference. Is that hey, Gary had an amazing run here. But you know how it is. It's why the Methodists have things figured out. They move preachers every 3 years. You know, you get stale. They get tired of hearing the same message over and over again. And I think that was the case here. And I think it was. I just think it was time.
We'll see on the road against Kansas. We'll know about both teams, and that's what's great about the schedule is every week brings some evidence, and no one, I don't think, is going to just separate because, as you said, there is no gimme. Brian, have fun in Lawrence. College game day, TCU in Kansas.